I'm so excited to be here today, and thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who know me, you know that when I talk about Israel, I'm usually smiling, and I love sharing who Israel is, an optimistic nation of dreamers and doers making our mark in the world. But a month and a half ago, when Operation Guardian of the Wall started, I too, for the first time since I got involved in promoting Israel's image in the world, got worried. I had never seen so much action online against Israel, and at the same time, I had never seen so many people in Israel and around the world wanting to right the wrong, to fight the fight. And as a result, it felt like my social media feed was exploding. Now, as I was watching this virtual fire ignite online, on both sides, and running in and out of the bomb shelter in real life, I get a text message from José Torres, the CEO of Bloom Consulting, who's joining us today from his home in Lisbon, Portugal. Hi, José.
Hi.
The text simply said, "Joanna, this is your moment." So I text back, "What do you mean?" And he responds, "When a country is in crisis, people want answers from the organization that is branding it. So you need to start speaking up." I immediately got on a Zoom call with him, which I actually recorded and will share it with you. And I asked him, if you were consulting the people of Israel, not the government, but just anyone who cares about Israel and is deeply troubled by the negative rhetoric about Israel on social media, what would you tell them to do? So, José, please share with our audience what you told me that they should do.
So my recommendation to you, Joanna, and based on my experience and the experience of our company in dealing with nation brands and dealing with country brands around the world, and especially dealing with situations where nation brands are under fire, let's put it this way, or are under pressure. And in specific cases with crisis, my recommendation to you was do nothing. That was exactly what I told you. Do nothing. And by doing nothing, you may ask the question, well, but that's kind of very anti-Israeli, isn't it? Like not to do anything. And I very much remember that. But the answer to that was, look, not doing nothing is really like do not engage. That was our recommendation. That was my recommendation. Why was that? Was that because the sentiment that will generate is not going to help Israel. So anytime you put a comment out there, you're just feeding and you're just adding fuel to the fire. So our recommendation is for every post or every comment you're gonna post, you're probably gonna have 10 negative ones. So avoid those 10 negative ones, and simply by not engaging on the narrative, because that's not the moment and that's not when you actually build or correct the nation brand, generally speaking, of course.
You're actually saying is because the social media algorithms actually pick up on more and more conversations, whether they're good or bad, it doesn't matter. What we're doing is basically pouring fuel onto the fire that was set against Israel. So actually what you're saying is completely counterintuitive to what most people in the audience are listening to from everybody else. You're saying the more we respond, the worse it is for us, for Israel?
Exactly. That's exactly it. In this particular moment, so not in a moment further down the line. So normally, and I'll explain this a little bit later, it's really about the aftermath. This is how you correct things. The important point, and when we were talking about this with you back then, was like, this is the moment, because this is when really the in Israel and outside Israel, the diaspora and so on, pays even more attention to the nation brand. So this was a perfect moment to start raising and having these conversations. This is a good moment to do so.
Okay. So as you probably know, and as you mentioned before, telling the Jewish people to do nothing at all and just stay silent is really too much to ask, considering our history. And of course, you can't tell an Israeli just to do nothing. So give me something, anything that can really give us, the people in the audience, something to do, because we really want to act. What do you suggest?
Yes. So again, the ideal thing would be not to engage, because again, that is actually doing something. Not engaging is doing something, and that's strategic. But if you would ask, okay, just please tell us like one thing that we could do, I would really, replicate a little bit what there's a European channel called Euronews, but you can check it online. That they have this section, and they have this very clever section that is called no comment, right? And basically, they just open the camera and show what's happening. And that's it. They just say the hour and where this is happening. That's it. No commenting, no opinion about it, just showing the facts. So this is what, if you would ask me one thing that we would recommend, this would be it. Just to open and show what's happening with your mic, camera, a phone, what have you, and place it in your controlled and closed media.
So almost like documentary filmmakers.
Kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Jose. I will get back to you later.
Thank you.
So we know that there's one thing we can do. If we absolutely must, we can go online and document, but without offering some interpretation, which then invites more attention online. So what we understand is that the objective is not to right the wrong, but to mitigate the harm that comes to the brand. But as somebody who's been working with social media for over a decade now, I really felt we needed to offer more insight and perhaps even advice. After thinking about it a bit, I realized there is a way to engage people in a safe space on social media, and that is to draw them into a private conversation on whichever social media platform you're on. In a private message, you have time to have a proper conversation, albeit a virtual one. You also can create some kind of rapport and common ground with whoever you're talking to, which is crucial to being able to exert influence over them. And most importantly, what Jose talked about, the algorithm doesn't pick up on those conversations, so you're not fanning the flames of the anti-Israel fire online. The thing is, I honestly had no clue what I would say once I'm in that private, safe space. I mean, I live in Israel. I'm fully aware of what's going on. I watch the news, but even I wasn't sure what talking points would work. After all, it really is so complicated, and it doesn't really look like anyone wants to listen anyway. So I called the only guy I know that can literally convince anyone to do anything, my good friend, Ariel Halevi. Come join us, Ariel.
How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. So we'll sit down. Okay, get myself comfortable. So Ariel is a specialist in strategic decision-making, persuasion, and influence without authority, and has used his speciality to train people how to effectively advocate for Israel for 2 decades now. You don't look that old, but okay.
Thank you.
Today, Ariel is co-founder of a global boutique consulting firm that works with senior executive leadership teams to achieve better business results using advanced decision-making and communication techniques. But his passion for Israel advocacy, I'm happy to say, remains. I called Ariel and I said, Ariel, if I'm on social media and I've managed to draw someone into a private message where I can actually have a conversation with them, what do I say about the situation? Ariel, what did you answer me?
I said, welcome to my game. I've been doing this for 10, 15 years now. We developed years ago an entire program for how to engage with people effectively. And if you're able to get people into a private conversation, then these principles should work very well.
Okay, amazing. So we don't have time right now to go through all of the principles. We will be able to do that later in an Ask Me Anything deep dive that we both have together. But can you share with the audience a very brief overview of your way of doing Israel advocacy, which really is quite different to others?
Well, I think the most important thing to understand here is that it's counterintuitive, which is what makes it difficult. Because it means we have to fight urges that we have that are automatic. And I would say that in this case, there are 2 things that are really very important to remember. A, they have to like you first. People are better persuaded by people they enjoy having a conversation with. I know it seems unlikely because you're having a very difficult conversation with somebody who your brain is telling you is the enemy, but if you can get them to like you, you're off to a good start. Number 2, you're not there to win. And more importantly, you're not there to defeat them or get them to lose. You're not likely to get somebody to say, oh, wow, thank God I met you. Everything I ever thought was wrong. That's just not going to happen. You want to build a process, and then using the various principles that we work on, you go through that process and you can actually engage in an effective way.
So I know that you have one specific thing that you always say, if you're going to remember one thing from what you hear today, this is going to be it. So can you share that first basic foundation of really effectively persuading other people?
the single most important thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you mentioned this before. You talked about the importance of building rapport. So you want to start by creating some kind of connection with the individual, and you want to make sure that the conversation is pleasant. That doesn't mean you can't say difficult things. You can, and you can disagree. But disagreeing doesn't mean fighting. And disagreeing and having a deeper level of analysis in a conversation doesn't mean they have to walk away all flustered and never want to have to hear from you again. So that would be the number one thing.
Yeah, and you actually have a really cool, catchy name to it.
That's right. It's called the Persuasion Equation. It's a very complicated mathematical equation that basically means you equal a smile. Meaning, if people enjoy engaging with you, they're going to want to speak with you more. They're going to be more open to what you have to say, even when it is disagreeable to their starting point. And even more importantly, they're going to want to speak to you again, which is very important.
Right, which is amazing because it sounds so simple, but in fact, you really can learn a set of techniques, and we're going to be talking about that a bit later. So thank you very much, Ariel.
You got it.
I can tell you from my own personal experience of trying out Ariel's techniques, it works. So much so that Ariel and I actually recorded an entire online course, which you can sign up to right after the summit is over, and learn it all in less than 90 minutes. I really recommend you do that. Now, we're almost out of time, and I'd like to ask Jose if he has some final words for the audience.
Yes, I think what's important, and I think really this is a special moment for the nation brand of Israel, because it raised and opened the conversation about so how do we build the brand? How do we protect the brand? How do we revert the crisis? And the question is, it's not while the crisis is happening, but it's really the aftermath. So I think it's really important is to think that the nation brand and the way to mitigate the crisis and potential negative perceptions is now it's the aftermath. So it's over the next year, 2 years, that you need to do an act. And here's about engaging, but engaging on other things that will foster positive sentiment towards the brand. So now is the moment. Now you ask us, what shall I do? Shall I get? Now it's the moment. Now it's the moment to engage with the nation brand of Israel.
So basically, it's all about building back the brand of Israel.
Building back, exactly. And it takes time. It's not overnight, and it's a question of consistency, and it's a question of engagement, and it's a question of following a path, and that's how you actually build the brand.
Okay, well, thank you very much to Jose and to Ariel. I'm going to sum up. So, number one, we know there will be another crisis. It's simply unavoidable. We have to accept we won't be able to right the wrong online, but we can mitigate the harm to the brand of Israel. Number two, we must recognize that social media is the least effective platform for successful Israel advocacy, so we need to use it wisely. And I know this is completely different from what you're hearing from everybody else, but maybe it's an opportunity to try something different. Number three, I know it's hard, but next time, and even now, when you see negative comments about Israel online, remember Jose's advice and don't engage publicly. There's simply no point, and actually it harms us because of the algorithm that keeps the conversation alive rather than lets it die down. The more you respond, the worse it is for us. Number four, we're not saying that you should abandon the virtual battlefield altogether. Quite the contrary. We recommend to proactively reach out to people who are saying negative things about Israel online through a private message and invite them to have a conversation on the private channel where you can use Ariel's techniques. Not only will you feel better about the outcome rather than frustrated, you'll also be instrumental in keeping the anti-Israel rhetoric at bay by not alerting the social media algorithms to keep this conversation alive. Number five, and most importantly, and this is how we ended, remember that the brand of Israel is not always in crisis. In fact, most of the time, we're not in a crisis of the magnitude we experienced recently. So if we want Israel to thrive and not just survive, the day the crisis is over, or a few weeks, a couple of months later, we must go back to rebuilding the brand of Israel, which is what we'll be focusing on for the rest of this event.